Well, good morning. I'm here to introduce Dedek, like you haven't already met him. Welcome to the workshop called Made in the Image of the Artist. We're fortunate to have Doug with us today. He's been serving as senior pastor at Raisin Valley Friends for 11 years. And he is married to Heidi, who's in the back, and they will be celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. And they have two grown children, Daniel and Callista. Doug and Heidi have shared their gift of hospitality with us, so I know he's a great artist. I've seen his creativity in his home, and I'm just really looking forward to this time together. So without further ado, I introduce to you Doug Chandler. Help me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. You've taken a chance on a workshop that sounds different, is going to be different than most of the workshops that you've seen around here. Let me explain why. About a year and a half ago, I felt very led by God to do a deeper study into art, what it means, why I do it, why it's important. And it combined a bunch of the passions that I have, passions for who God is, passions for bringing peace to the world, passions for art, passions for preaching, passions for bringing people to God. It brought all those together, and it took me about a year to come up with the handout, the paper that I'm going to give you. And when I finished, at the beginning of this year, around January, February, I felt very pressed by the Lord. Contact the Eastern region and see if they want you to do a workshop on this. I was like, they don't want me to do a workshop on this. I contacted the Eastern region and they said, we don't want you to do a workshop on this. We've got our workshop set, the different groups, the different boards, they each present a workshop, and so that's how it works. And I was like, okay, fine, that's an answer from God. And then I got an email just about a week and a half later, and well, we're very excited about this opportunity for you to do a workshop, and we've decided that we want you to do one. Great, so God apparently has me here doing this for a reason. He very much laid it on my heart to develop these materials. He laid it on my heart to ask to do a workshop, and he's, I'm assuming, laid it on your heart to be in this particular workshop. Maybe you didn't feel or sense a voice from God saying, please come to this particular place at this particular time. But I'm certain that at least one of you in this room, possibly more than one of you in this room, needs to hear what you're about to hear this morning. And it's not an accident that you are here. So with that in mind, considering that this is a God thing, let us go to him and begin with prayer. I can say that with some confidence, Lord, because I believe that everything is a God thing. One thing after another in our lives is appointed. And we don't always take advantage of the things that you bring about, the people that we meet, the lessons that we're taught, but everything is here for our benefit, that we might learn, that we may become more like you, more like your Son. I pray this morning that as I present these materials that you have given to me, that you would open our minds and our eyes, even mine once again, to review, to see afresh these ideas that I believe are so important to our Christian walk. And I pray, Lord, for anybody that may be watching this later, they couldn't be here for one reason or another, I ask the same thing, that as they hear what's going on, as they read the materials, that they too would sense your presence and your work in their lives. I do have a pile of handouts, if you would like to. Sure. That should be enough. Everything I'm presenting this morning is going to be mostly included in here, and I'm going to follow it generally. There may be parts that I'm skipping. I was expecting a 50-minute session, but I guess it's now an hour and 45?
Hour and 15?
Hour and 15, so hour and 15, hour 45, it's the same thing. So I may be able to actually hit more things. I do want to take time at the end to allow you guys to interact, to ask some questions, to discuss some of this stuff. So if there is more time at the end, that is great. I want to begin by, Brenda gave me a wonderful introduction, but I want to tell you a bit more about who I am. I'm a child of God. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an artist, and I'm a pastor. When I first got my Facebook page, I don't even know how many years ago, early 2000s, it was, still a new thing. I never did adopt MySpace, so I went straight to Facebook when it came out. They asked for a bio, and this was the bio that I put down. And I put it down after a lot of thought already about who I am and what makes me unique. And the reason I chose those words is because they don't just describe what I do, they describe the relationships that I have. I am a child of God. That is the primary relationship that I am in. He is my Father and my Creator. I am a redeemed child of God. I have been adopted by God, the Creator of the universe. He has loved me, and by faith in the blood of Jesus Christ shed for me on the cross, my sins are forgiven, and I am bound for heaven. This is my primary defining characteristic. When I think about who I am, my relationship with God is first and foremost. The second relationship that I chose to describe who I am is a husband. Heidi is my wife. We've been married now for 30 years, and she is amazing. My main purpose in life is to draw her into a deeper relationship with God, to serve her, and to love her. That is my primary relationship with anybody outside of God, and I think that's extremely important. Third, I'm a father. I have 2 wonderful children. My son, Daniel, is autistic. My daughter, Callista, he is 24, yes, and she's 22. I have to ask because he keeps getting older and changing that number on me. But yeah, my children are now grown, adult. They are flourishing and beginning to live their own lives. But I have this responsibility to them after my wife, but before anybody else on this earth, to help raise them, and again, to draw them into a deeper relationship with God themselves. I want them to soar. I want them to succeed. Do you have a handout? Great, okay. Next, I'm an artist. This is my relationship with the natural world. This is my relationship with creation. I use this word because in one word, at least to me, I don't know that anybody else hearing the word artist would associate all these things with it. But when I think of artist, I think of, this is the way I look at nature. When I'm out there on the beach taking pictures or walking down, I see things through the eyes of an artist. I see the colors. I see the patterns. I see the interplay of light and dark. I hear the sounds of the waves, and I try and capture that in a photograph. When I hear music, I hear it differently because I play music and I write music. When I write, I'm thinking differently because I'm an artist. It sort of defines my relationship to everything I can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, all of those things. I'm looking at the world around me as an artist, as a creator. I've been doing that for, well, pretty much my whole life. So this describes me and my relationship with creation. And lastly, I'm a pastor. This describes my relationship with everybody I meet. And I don't just think of myself as a pastor of the people that come into my church and sit down in the pews and listen to me preach. Yes, I'm their pastor, and more closely than I'm a pastor to everybody else. But when I sit down at a table in a restaurant and my waitress comes over, I am at that moment their pastor. When I meet somebody at Walmart and we talk, I am their pastor. Right now, like it or not, I am in one form or another pastoring everybody in this room. Because a pastor is meant to draw people into a deeper relationship with God. To shepherd them, to like a sheepdog, and not to nip at the heels of every single sheep they come across, but to see a sheep and then, well, there's the shepherd, and they're maybe not as close as they could be, just wander around that side of them and nudge them gently in this direction. So if I can do that with people I meet, complete strangers, friends, my children, my wife, the people in my church, that describes my relationship with the people of this world. So that's who I am. I said I was an artist, and I've dabbled in many arts over the years. I've tried crocheting, sewing, sculpture, very poorly. I was not good at sculpture. I kind of play the guitar, and when I say kind of, it means that I don't pick it up very often anymore. And even when I did, I was more of a several chords and strum it in patterns. I never could learn to do the finger picking thing. I've written some music and arranged other pieces. I love to cook. I enjoy woodworking. Recently I began to polish rocks, which was a lot more of an art than I thought. It is exciting. If you do not know, in Canton, they have an excellent rock shop called The Rock Shop, and you should stop in sometime and take a look. There's a little plug, unasked for by them. They didn't even give me a discount for that. So I have spent some money there already this weekend. For many years, I hesitated to show my creations. I made art, and I would make it for my wife. And I would make it maybe for the people that I love, and they would get to see it. But I didn't show the world. Photography was the first one that I really began to show people what I was creating, but even then it was a struggle. I competed online in different competitions. I was part of several different websites. I ended up having my own art studio, my own photography studio for a while, my business. And I won numerous awards, but every single time I put a photo online for people to look at, in my heart was this: are they gonna love me? Are they gonna like it? They're gonna judge me. Are they gonna think this is a good photograph or a bad photograph? And my ego depended on the comments that I received below. And I didn't like that, because that was it was negative either way. Either they loved it and my pride soared, and I thought, wow, what a great artist Doug is, or they didn't like it and my pride got crushed, and I thought, oh man, maybe I should just stop this. Nobody likes what I'm doing. And I wasn't seeking to glorify God through my photography. About 14 years or so ago, I began to be able to make that transition, to be able to put my art out there so that God would be glorified. So I have pictures like this throughout my church. I share these on Facebook. I've got hundreds of them now, not all printed out on canvas. But I now take photographs so that when people look at them, I don't want people to look at these pictures and say, oh my goodness, Doug is an amazing photographer. Thank you, I already know that. But I want them to look at them and say, oh my goodness, God is an amazing artist. Look at the things he does. Look at the nature that he has made, the spectacular world that we live in. And as we'll see a little bit later, that should want us to get to know the artist even better. So I have begun to share my art, and that's part of what has led to this, is I finally got to the place in my life where my pride was not so much of a hindrance that I could probably share something like this now without everybody needing to love me and being able to love the idea of art. I've used the word art several times already, and I'm going to use it a lot more as we talk for the next hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours, however long this goes, 2 hours and 15 minutes, you said? Art, I've defined it here. This is not completely my own definition, but I've taken a few other definitions and brought them together into one cohesive thought that I like. It's the expression or application of creative skill and imagination, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Art communicates more than fact. It is an intentional act by a person to try and communicate something or do something that would make another individual feel or know or understand. So I've in the next paragraph there, I've mentioned Jackson Pollock. And if you are a big Jackson Pollock fan, I apologize. You're allowed to like his stuff, but he is not an artist. And the paintings that he produces are not art. By his own admission, they are the results of his feelings and emotions being given free rein. So if he shows up in the art studio that day and he's been in traffic and he's irritated and frustrated, he just starts grabbing paint tubes and squeezing things all over the canvas, haphazardly, not trying to communicate that anger, not trying to communicate that frustration, but just in the frustration, spewing it out. It's not art any more than, say, a depressed person sitting down on a piano and just banging away is making art, or somebody sitting on a typewriter and just mindlessly putting words together is writing poetry. Art is intentional. It sets out from the beginning to have a purpose. You want to achieve something with your art, something specific. Now, there are lots of forms of art. I haven't included all of them here because it's almost unlimited in the number of ways that we can be artists. Some that are included in here are music, painting, photography, drawing, cooking, sewing, carpentry, masonry, writing, architecture, sculpture, dance. And almost all of those things are not art intrinsically, but they can be art. Almost everything you do can be art if you set about to do it in the right way. So if you are a farmer and you pick up stones every year, because as you plow your fields, you're churning up new stones, and you take those stones and you pile them in a pile at the edge of the field, and you end up making a wall, that's not art. But if a mason comes and looks at those stones and arranges them in a specific order in order to try and bring order out of the chaos and something beautiful, and to make a wall that will gently flow over a hill and lead you into the distance with your eyes, that can become art. And we've all taken selfies. If you grab your phone because you want to remember where you are, and so you're with your friend, you put your arms around each other, you both smile, you click, you take a picture, that's probably not art. But you can make a photograph art. If you think about, well, what's the background look like, and how am I dressed, and which angle do I want to take this photo from? Not just that most appealing, perfect angle, but I want something a little bit different. I want to communicate something to the people who look at this picture that's different than a selfie. It becomes art. Art is rarely, if ever, accidental. It's intentional. You set out with a purpose to create, to do, to make beauty, to make people feel or understand something they couldn't understand before. Art, as I said in the definition, it communicates more than fact. You can see more than what is actually there. Hopefully in these pictures up here, you're not just getting a sense of the places or the creatures that God has made. You're getting more than that from that. You're getting a sense of actually seeing beyond it to the Creator who made such variety and beauty every single day. Art speaks to the soul. It communicates more deeply than mere words or language. It can give or convey hope, joy, peace, pain, grief, strength, or happiness. It can bring long-lost memories poignantly back to mind, cause us to see things from a new perspective, or even teach truths never before imagined. Art has those things available to it. It can do those things. That does not mean that every time somebody says, this is art, it's going to do that. Yeah, some of these pictures are not going to speak to each one of you. Some of these pictures, one of them may be jumping out at you right now. Maybe none of them. You're like, oh, well, those are okay. I wouldn't have minded being there, but I wouldn't hang it on my wall. We each have different preferences, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes art speaks to us, and sometimes it shouldn't. The main thrust of what I've been studying, the main thrust of what I've put together here, is the next section, which takes us through almost all the way to the end. Why should we make art? I use the word we intentionally. Why should I? Because if I'm not making art for these reasons, then I'm not doing it right. And why should you make art? These are the reasons why you should be an artist. And these are reasons why you should be an artist if you are not. I didn't ask the question yet, who in this room is an artist? But if you're not going to answer that question, I'm an artist, then why not? These questions or these next several points are going to hopefully, within your mind, within your heart, stir a desire to become an artist, to be able to create things. The first reason, and the title of this session or this workshop, God is an artist and we are made in His image. This was the primary reason for me doing this whole thing, was this sole thought, and then everything else got developed around this. God is an artist. I don't think there's anybody in this room that would debate that point for a moment. Maybe if we went to a non-Christian, an atheist, somebody who didn't even believe in God, they might say, well, your God or what God is not an artist. But if you look at the world around you, how can you not believe that it's art? He made creation, and it could have been bland and boring. He had choice. Every food we eat could taste the same. It would still be nourishing. It would still provide sustenance, but it could have all been one flavor or no flavor. We didn't have to have flavors to food. He could have given us sight, and it could have been in black and white. Instead, he chose the color spectrum, which is actually a very narrow range of light. I expect in heaven we maybe have eyes that can see slightly more colors that we can't personally even imagine right now because our brains are limited. There might be more to see, more to do, but right now He's given us color and shadow and light. He's given us so much. Artistry is an important part of God's character. He designed us to appreciate and enjoy it, to be able to recognize his artistry. In other words, he's not just an artist. God is an artist. He created everything beautiful, and then he continues to create today. Every sunset, every sunrise, every snowflake that falls, every frost-covered window, if you see the snow fall in the winter and the trees are covered with the snow, or you watch a waterfall, you see a rainbow stretch across the sky, or you look up and the clouds are beautiful that day, that's God newly creating something for you to see. Every flower that blooms, every tree that grows, every baby that's born, God is forming it in a womb and making it beautiful. He didn't just simply say, I created everything, I rested for a day so that the people would rest, and now I step back from creation and I'm done. He is today, right now, a creator. Not having created, but currently creating. At this moment, somewhere around this world, there's a sunrise. Somewhere around this world, there's a sunset. Somewhere around this world, there's somebody sitting in a meadow, enjoying the sounds of the birds, looking at the flowers that are in bloom, and saying, wow, this is a wonderful place. They're smelling all the scents, and God is creating that as he goes. He didn't just set the world in motion and say, okay, it's off on its own. He's continually making. And he made us with the unique ability to appreciate his art. One way that we know he's an artist is by looking at us and saying, well, how are we made? And we are made to be able to appreciate art. We are made to be able to appreciate his creation. We were given the ability to see, as I mentioned. We can see color, pattern, light, shadow, shading, and hue, thousands of twinkling stars in the sky. Our eyes can detect a few photons that make it to Earth, fluffy white clouds overhead, a pretty rock, a cherry tree in blossom. He made all those things, and our eyes take them in and immediately are able to see what he made, and it's beautiful, it is good, it's wonderful. Even this cursed world is still beautiful and good. Sound, many of you are musicians, or all of you probably appreciate some form of music or other. It's loud, and then it's soft. There's timbre and tone. Sound waves create harmonies and dissonance. They work together, and they make new notes just by the waves. I don't even know how that works, but the waves collide together and then make new notes that are higher up. It's amazing, and they all work together so that our souls move with the music. It's beautiful. Smell. It conveys information about what's good and bad. That's what evolutionists would tell you. They would say, well, you sniff something and you know, I shouldn't eat this, and you sniff something else and you should eat that. This one, that smells rotten. That's probably not good anymore. This one, that smells fresh. I can eat that. That's so much more than that. Our olfactory senses are capable of sensing. They thought thousands, then 10,000s, now hundreds of thousands, or millions of unique, different scents. We as humans can differentiate between them. And you will smell something and it will bring back memories. You walk into their house and somebody is baking cookies, and your mind is instantly transported, and you breathe in deeply, and the smell of that melting chocolate and the baking cookies and the toasty edge crispness, and that you smell all that, and your mouth starts watering immediately like Pavlov's dogs. It's amazing how just the smell of cookies can do that, or fresh baked bread, or that meadow I was talking about that somebody's sitting in somewhere in the world right now, and they're breathing in that fresh air. Perhaps the spring rain just went by, and you know how it smells right after the fresh rain just falls, and the air is clean all of a sudden. Or you go to the ocean or to a lake, and there's a dead fish over here, and you walk past the dead fish, you're like, that's not good. But 20 feet down, because the air's blowing the other way, 20 feet down, you can smell the salt water, you can smell the fresh air, and it's so wonderful. Or an apple pie. Most of my favorite smells are foods. And that is something that God gave us to be able to appreciate his creation. It's unnecessary. And evolution simply says you need smell to be able to know what is good to eat and what is not good to eat. Everything else is an accident to them. But we say no. Everything else is the great artist wanting to thrill our senses, wanting us to look at the world around us, to see it, to taste it, to smell it, and go, wow, God, what a thing you've made. And speaking of taste, there is salty, sweet, bitter, umami, sour, and savory. 6 different flavors that we can taste. You would think then that everything we taste is one of those 6 different flavors, but it's not. It seems like there's an endless different variety of combinations. If you live in Canton or you come to Canton, say, for a yearly meeting, don't just go to a restaurant that serves the food that you've tasted many times before. Explore. There's Indian restaurants and Thai restaurants. There's a Filipino restaurant. There are all different kinds of restaurants. You will find different combinations of foods that you've had before. If you like Mexican, you've had cilantro. If you like American, you've had cucumbers, and you've had vinegar, and you've had different things. And then you go to a Thai restaurant and you have a salad. They've combined those things with peanuts together, and you taste that, and you're like, I've never tasted anything like this. I've tasted each of these individual ingredients, but the whole thing together, oh, it's new and fresh and amazing. We can taste the difference between an orange and a tangerine, between a lime and a lemon, and isn't it wonderful? I'll tell you what, I never had it happen to me, but when I found out that COVID could remove your sense of smell and taste, and if it did for any of you and you haven't gained it back, I'm so sorry. But I mean, God gave us this. What a horrible thing to if you lose that ability to be able to taste the food around you, to be able to enjoy it. Because when we sit down at the table and we say, thank you, Lord, for this food, we're not simply thanking Him for the nourishment that He's giving our bodies. We're thanking Him for the delight of the things that He has created and made for us to eat. We have touch. Soft or firm, pain and pleasure. Our skin is so sensitive and capable of doing so much. You rub your hands along a smooth marble statue, or maybe you've got this soft blanket that sits on your couch, or there's rough burlap here or there, or you touch Velcro and it's different. Every one of those tactile sensations is kind of a form of beauty. And then you add it all together. You eat a meal, you sit down and you smell the smells, you taste the taste, your mouth detects the crunch of maybe something crisp in there, and the chew of a firm noodle, and the soft coating of the fat of the butter, and the bread with the crispy edges and the toast on the outside, and you take it all together and you bring it in, and it's amazing. Is anybody else drooling right now? Yeah. And then to top it all off, aside from the senses that He gave us to be able to recognize and see creation, to be able to love it and know what it is, He gave us a mind to be able to enjoy it. We perceive beauty. As I said, not every one of you is going to look at every one of these photographs and say, those speak to me, that is beauty. But there is something that you do see as beauty. There's something that you do like. It may be different than what I like or what other people in this room like, but you see something and you're like, that's amazing. Because your mind is able to perceive. We don't simply see, hear, taste, smell, and feel the world around us. We have a mind that appreciates it. We are made in His image. So, God is an artist, and it's an important part of His character. And we are made to be able to appreciate that art. That's how far we've gotten, not very far yet. Good thing they gave me 2.5 hours. We're made in His image, and you've heard that time and time again. It's where we get our sense of worth and value. You are not a pile of chemicals. You are not simply a bag of flesh. You are the very image of God. That you take in your mind the idea of a piece of metal sat down on a rock, and then a hammer with imprints on it brought down upon that piece of metal, and then when it's brought back up, that metal has an imprint on it in the shape of the print on the hammer. That's what we're talking about with image. Like a coin is struck. God struck us with His image so that we reflect and are like Him in every way. Who you are in every single way, except for the fall and your sin nature, is a reflection of the Creator. Every single aspect of who you are. That's something very important. The image of God grants infinite value. It's the reason for our intrinsic work. But it means that because God is a worker, we're workers. God made us to do, to be constantly striving, to be pushing. He's moral. So we're moral. That's part of the image of God stamped upon us. Our sense of right and wrong, of good and evil. He imagines, so we imagine. He loves, so we love. He judges, desires, hates, and grieves, and so do we. Because God is an artist, we are also meant to be artists. We're made to be creative. We're not intended to just appreciate beauty, but to make beauty. The second reason why we should be artists, I think the first one is probably enough, or we could call it quits, but they gave me 2 hours and 45 minutes, so I've got to throw it out.
It's growing.
God created this world as an art studio and us to be artists. He didn't just make the world to be functional. He made it with more purpose than that. How many of you are familiar with the game Minecraft? You don't have to have played it before, but are you familiar with its existence? Okay, I've never played it, but I am familiar with its existence. In Minecraft, you get this block-like character who goes around and digs up different materials and shoves them into his inventory. And he's able to take these different materials and craft them into different things. If you arrange them on your crafting table, apparently, you can take rocks and turn them into an axe, or wood that you chop down and something else, and you can make, I don't know how it works. But it's called a sandbox game. And that means that the artists, or the creators of the game, have simply given the people who play it a large number of tools and an engine that understands what happens when you put those things together, and then given the people who play that game free rein to play out however they like. And interestingly enough, the people who play that game, Minecraft, and again, I'm not one of them, I don't know much about it, but they have created things far beyond and above anything that the developers of the game thought was possible. They've made computers in the game. Computers that work with switches and ones and zeros and can do math and add stuff up. They create huge buildings and replicas of different things. They've made robots that can move. I don't know all the things they've done. But in some of these sandbox games, I'm more familiar because of my son with one called Bad Piggies. Maybe you remember that from many years ago, but in that game you would get a couple crates and a wheel or two and a fan, and then maybe some wings, and you would put the wheels on the crates, and then you would roll it down a hill, and it was like a soapbox. And then they would give you an engine or a fan, you'd stick that on there, and now it propels it forward, and wings, and it will actually fly, and you can make all these different things. And that's the way the developer made the game. They made it so that you could be creative within the game and build that sense of, I'm making something, imagining something, creating something all on my own. That is what we live in. We live in a world that is so similar to that. If you look at the periodic table, you will see that the elements have every property you could desire. I've been talking for a long time, so let me ask a question. Just shout it out when you think of something, but I want you to look around you at this room and name the different materials you see. Wood. Plaster.
Fabric.
Fabric.
Metal.
Metal.
Paint.
Paint.
Glass.
Glass.
Block.
Block. We can stop there, that's good enough. Wood. God made trees. And he made some of those trees hard, and some of them soft. And some of them float, and some of them sink. And some of them are so permeable to water that they're almost useless for different things. They burn and give us fire. He gave us metal, and not just one type of metal. He gave us soft metals and hard metals. He gave us metals that fracture when they're bent, and metals that bend easily. He gave us metals that are able to be attracted to magnets, and metals that aren't attracted to magnets. And then he gave us metals that conduct electricity, and metals that don't conduct electricity. And then he gave us the ability to combine these metals together into new things. So we can take tin and add it to iron and make steel, and we can do all these different things. We can make stuff that is hard and functional and durable. He gave us silicon. A third of the Earth's crust is made out of silicon. We melt it down and we get glass, and it's transparent, and the light that we can see passes through it. We can do all these different things, and plaster is a type of thing that we find in the earth. If you can imagine it, if your brain can think, I wish this thing could be made, God has made materials that we can make that thing out of. Hey, the way we got here this morning, I mean, most of you probably drove in a car, right? It had rubber tires and steel hubs and engines that can contain explosions and fuel that works. And there's plastics and leathers and cloths and most of you probably have wood interiors in your old station wagons that you got here. You have all those different things. Why? Why would God make a world with all of those different unique properties? Because he wants us to use them. He wants us to use our imaginations and make new things. Computers are not outside of God's plan because God made computers possible. Spaceflight is not outside of God's plan because God made spaceflight possible. Building tall buildings is not outside of God's plan. Everything you can think of and do with your hands, God intended for us to do. And unlike the creators of Minecraft, who were surprised at the number of things that these gamers could do with their creation, with the tools they were given, such small, finite tools, God is not surprised at what we can do. He, obviously, with his mind, knows everything that we could and can and ever will do. I'm kind of excited about heaven, by the way. This isn't in your materials at all, but one of the reasons why I'm excited about heaven is because I'm going to get to continue to learn and grow and do and create and make and explore. And it's going to be an endless forever and ever process of me becoming more like Christ, more like God, knowing him better and doing more. I was so dreading heaven when I was a teenager. I mean, believe me, I wanted to go to heaven much more than I wanted to go to hell. There was never any question in my mind, like, but I was imagining the Gary Larson picture with the fluffy white clouds and the fat guy with the halo sitting on there with a harp, and I'm thinking, I didn't even play the harp. I don't want to play the harp. Of all the instruments out there, give me a saxophone or something at least. I don't want to play the harp and sit on a cloud and how boring it's going to be. And I thought, well, I'm going to know everything. And I'm gonna be right about everything. I'm never going to be wrong, and I'm never going to have to learn new stuff. And I'm not going to have debates and discussions. And I'm not going to sit down in school or read a book and learn new things and develop new skills. No, we're not going to get to heaven and automatically be perfect. I mean, morally, yes. But our knowledge, our abilities, and God is expecting us to continue to make, to do, to be, to build, to grow, to create. I'm looking forward to heaven because I'm an artist here on earth. And I know that God is going to be able to take who I am now and not change me, but turn me into the best me that I could be and allow that me to flourish in a world that he's created. So back to where we are. Consider the following tools and parts in our sandbox of a planet. Think of the implications. We have wool and cotton, oil and gas, steel and glass, clay and stone, fire and water. Look around yourself and be amazed at the variety and functionality of this world. The house you live in, the car you drive, the appliances in our kitchen, the phone in your pocket. All these are possible because God made a world in which nearly anything we can set our minds to is possible. He clearly wants us to design, to create, to build, to refine. He placed us in an environment with all the tools we need to do so. What's more, he gave us imaginations. You can think of things that have never existed before. Situations that haven't come about. Did you realize how spectacular that is? That you can take things you've known, things you've seen, and put them together in ways they've never been put together before, and in your mind imagine new situations, new circumstances, new things. That's the image of God stamped upon you. And why would you have an imagination? To take what is and think of what could be, unless God wanted us to take what is and turn it into what could be. We can't help but to experiment and explore. He gave us a love of beauty. We long to be surrounded by it and to be swept away under its influence. I'll get deeper into this later, but he created us to be creators, not merely consumers. We're designed to be designers and built to be builders, not merely users. As I said, I don't want to get too much into this because that's a part of later, but this is something that over the last couple of years, I've really felt is very important, especially for coming generations in America, as they have been raised in a consumer culture and they have not been taught to be creators, to be adding to, I don't want to get too right. Art is not meant to be made by the select special few. It's meant to be made by all. Some are gifted, some are more naturally talented, some have exercised those gifts, but they must still develop those skills. But anyone can be an artist if they set their minds to it. Even if there's an art is not grand, even if it's never going to be displayed in a museum or something, it still is important. When you look at these, I do hope, because you know my entire ego rests on it. It doesn't anymore. But I do hope that you like these, that you see these pictures up here, these butterflies, and you think that is a wonderful picture of a butterfly. That is a result of 750,000 photos that I've taken. This is a result of 25 years or so of taking pictures, sometimes hundreds in a day. It's a result of learning how a camera works, of training my mind, of seeing this. My first pictures were junk. And I don't mean my first pictures as the first roll of film or flash card full. The first 5,000 pictures, I don't show a single one of them. And then between the first 200,000 or 300,000 pictures, I maybe only have a handful that I like. I would take 1,000 pictures and I would be happy with one of them. Now, because I've done it so much, I've gotten to the point where I can take 100 pictures and I'll be happy with 2 or 3 of them, which is great. When I was first starting out in photography, I was studying how to do it and learning how cameras work and what makes a good photographer. I read an article by a National Geographic photographer. This was way back when they used film cameras, because the digital cameras hadn't gotten good enough yet. And the photographer didn't write the articles. The person who would go write the articles would wait for the photographer. The photographer would go, say it's to New Zealand, to photograph sheep. I don't know why you do that for National Geographic, but say they did. Yeah. That photographer would go there, and apparently they would take about 36,000 photos. They would take 1,000 rolls of film. It would take them about 6 months. They would spend hours of the day following around an inchworm to try and capture that picture of an inchworm. These are the best photographers, nature photographers in the world at the time. They would do that, and they wouldn't know what they would look like, but they'd come back with all those rolls of film. They would develop them, and they'd look at them one at a time with their little light things so they wouldn't have to print them out. They'd look at them, and they would narrow it down to their top 100. And they'd set those apart. Here's my top 100. And then the person who's writing the article, whatever it's about, would go to New Zealand, would spend a couple of weeks studying, researching, writing the article, would come back, and they would be given those 100 photographs, and they would narrow it down to their top 10 or 15. And then they would hand in their article and those 10 to 15 pictures to the editor of National Geographic. And the editor would take 2 or 3 of the pictures they felt were of the high enough quality to be published in this prestigious magazine. 2 or 3 photos out of 36,000 from the greatest photographers on earth who have been doing this as their job for many, many years. I was like, oh, well, I mean, I have the advantage of being able to chimp. I can look at the back of my camera. I can see instantly, are they good? Are they not good? I'm not taking pictures of inchworms, which are more difficult. I am taking pictures of butterflies, which is really hard. I was talking about this earlier as we were waiting to begin. This butterfly picture, for example, is taken at a butterfly house. I think it might be called a lepidoptery or something like that, up in Traverse City. And families are coming in. It's 95 degrees and humid in there. It's basically a greenhouse. I'm sweating. My shirt is soaked all the way through, and I'm spending 2 or 3 hours in there. And I see this butterfly, and I want to get a picture. And it's flitting from here to there, so I'm chasing it around, trying not to step on butterflies or kids. And it lands, and I finally, but it's wrong, because behind that butterfly it's a greenhouse. And so there's windows, and it's a distracting background, so I don't even bother to snap the photo. And then it lands again, but it doesn't land on something that I can take a good picture of. The butterfly is not fully in view. So I might chase that butterfly around for half an hour, and I might take 3 or 4 shots of it. And I come back, and I'm excited when one of them is properly in focus, and I'm able to take and get that photo, which I think is National Geographic worthy. I'm excited about that, and I couldn't do it as well without a digital camera. I say all that because I want you to understand, art is not something for anybody except for a very select few savants who sit down at a piano and play a sonata, or create their own music, or sit down with a pad and a pencil and draw a beautiful picture. I am sure that Rembrandt and Monet threw away hundreds or thousands of canvases they never wanted the world to see. Or they took them and they painted over them again because what they got wasn't worth showing. It took them years and years to get that good. And then even after that, you go to a museum and you look at the Monets, and not all of them are that great. There are a few that are wonderful. The same thing with the Rembrandts and the sculptures and the Michelangelos and that sort of thing. Even the greatest artists, not everything they made is perfect and wonderful and beautiful. So we practice and we get better and we learn and we grow. Which brings us to the next point. Making art is slow, time-consuming, and often difficult. It's a good thing you guys gave me 3 hours because I'm barely making it through this. This may sound like 3 negatives. Art's slow. Well, that doesn't sound like a good thing. It's time-consuming. I've already got too much on my plate. I don't have enough time for what I'm doing. And it's difficult. It really is difficult to make good art. But it's not. These are not negative things. Art is slow. It causes you to slow down. As I mentioned with the butterflies in the butterfly house, as I'm in there for a couple hours in the sweltering heat and the high humidity, chasing butterflies around, hoping to get a few good photos, I'm watching family after family come in. Parents with their little kids, grandparents with their little kids, and middle-aged people with their little kids without anybody at all. You see them come in and they walk around and the butterfly lands on their shoulders and the little kid screams and then the butterfly lands on their sister's shoulders and she's just thrilled. She's now a princess. And they're happy, they're enjoying themselves. But they don't get to take the same amount of time as I do to appreciate it. As I'm chasing that butterfly around, I'm becoming more familiar with the way it flies, with the way its wings flap, with the different places it's likely to land. This butterfly prefers the white flowers. That butterfly doesn't go to flowers at all. This butterfly stays low to the ground. I need to actually lay down and wait for it to come back to this same spot that it's come back several times before, and that's the perfect angle. And I actually do that. I will lay down on the floor of the butterfly house with my camera up at an angle. This leaf, I've already watched the butterfly land on that particular leaf 3 times. 5 minutes later, it lands on that leaf. I snap 3 or 4 photos. I get the picture I'm looking for. And in the meantime, I've slowed down. And I'm in the moment. And I'm enjoying life. And the beauty means more to me. More than if I wasn't doing art at that point. The same thing, I talked about the lion as well earlier before we started. That picture of a lion is at the Cleveland Zoo. And my family came to the lion exhibit with me, and then they left the lion exhibit. They went and they looked at the fish and the gorillas, and they looked at the giraffes and the seals, and they came back to the lion exhibit and they said, "Are you still here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still here. The lion's asleep. It needs to wake up." And I will shout at the lion. I'll wave at the lion. I'll yell at the lion. I'll make clicky sounds at the lion. I'll make beepy sounds at the lion. Finally, the lion looks up and it walks over to the glass and it stares at this other kid right there, and the light is perfect, and I take that picture, and I have such an appreciation for the way the lion moves and the way its muscles ripple underneath its fur, and for the power in its claws, and for when it stretches out and yawns and its claws do this, and it mouth agape when it yawns, and it shakes its mane. And while I was there, because I was waiting, I was also seeing the birds that were flying and how close that sparrow got to that lion without being afraid, and the clouds as they pass overhead, and I'm living. and I'm appreciating, because art made me slow down. Our lives are packed full of things to do. Our itineraries are full, overly full. The list of things we meant to do, planned to do, intended to do, wanted to do, and never did because we simply ran out of time and energy is ridiculously long. Art is not about adding to that list. Art is not saying, I need one more thing to be. I went to a workshop and now I'm supposed to be an artist in addition to everything else. That's not what we're talking about here. It's not just one more thing to add to the list to feel bad about not having done. It's something to intentionally slow ourselves down and focus on one thing and one thing only at a time. I find that if I'm too busy in a week to get all my work done, it's actually good to stop doing the work, to sit down at my desk, to get out a pad of paper and do some sketching, to walk outside and take photographs for 10, 15 minutes, to grab my guitar and strum away and sing a song. And then when I come back to my desk and my heart rate is down and my mind has been focused and everything else is put on the back burner, I'm able to focus better and do more in less time than if I hadn't done the art. Being creative requires our focus. It helps us to be more present in the moment. In addition, the repetitive motions involved in certain art forms like painting, drawing, or playing a musical instrument can have a soothing, almost meditative effect on the body, lowering heart rate and muscle tension. That's not me speaking. This is research, scientific, psychological research. People that do art are healthier. We'll look at that at the end if we have enough time. 3 hours and 15 minutes is flying. So, art is good for you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It really does help in all those ways. Art also gives us a sense of accomplishment. It reminds us that we have purpose. We are adding to the world around us rather than just taking away. One of the greatest dangers of our current culture is the malaise of consumerism. So many Americans eat food others have made, watch videos others have filmed, drive cars they've not designed, built, repaired, maintained, or even paid off. Nothing in their life adds to the world around them. It only takes away, and that does not give them a sense of purpose. When we create, even if it's just for ourselves, even if it's just setting pen to paper, or something as simple as taking a photograph or singing a song, it gives us a sense of who we are, above and beyond just consumers. Let's skip. Because we're formed in the image of the great creator, being artists comes naturally. It's part of our very essence. You walk into a room of kindergartners. Go ahead and do it sometime. Walk into a room of kindergartners and say, who in here is an artist? How many hands go up? All of them, right? Because they draw with their crayons, trying to stay inside the lines, but they're making art. And what do they do with that? They take that to mom, and they are so proud, and mom hangs that on the refrigerator, and they love to make art. They love to create. It's part of who the kindergartner is. Now walk into a class of 5th graders. Ask the very same question. What happens? Maybe half, a third of the hands go up. A lot of those 5th graders don't think of themselves as artists anymore. Go into a high school class. A few. The nerds, right? The geeks, the loners. The ones who really do art regularly, who sit there and sketch in their textbooks and make the teachers mad when they turn them in at the end of the year, the ones that draw pictures on every test and quiz, the ones who maybe are in band class and actually consider music to be art, but very few comparatively. Now, this particular workshop was entitled Made in the Image of the Artist, and the description included the idea of art, so maybe more than average in this room might consider themselves artists. But if you were to go out into the main area yesterday or during the worship service, and you were to say, who in here is an artist? Raise your hands. How many hands go up? Very few. Why is that? Why does every single kindergartner think I'm an artist? And very few adults do. Is it because those kindergartners were jaded? They hadn't lived life yet? They hadn't gained the experiences to realize they weren't really artists. They were like those people that used to go on American Idol that can't sing at all, but they really think they're spectacular. They're going to win the show and produce records, and they can't even hold a tune. Is that what's happened? No. No, the world around them chased out this idea of being an artist. And that's sad because they were made in the image of the artist. It's part of their core being. We need to return to that somewhat. The older the kids get, the more they've had it pounded into their heads that other things are far more important. The creativity being driven out of us is a precious connection to our Maker. Losing it is a costly mistake. But the good news is that it's never truly gone. If you are not currently creating art, if you don't consider yourself an artist, if it's something you only very rarely do, that's still in you. It's still a part of your nature. It's part of who you were made to be. It can be developed and brought back out. And hopefully that's part of what this workshop will do. You can begin to explore the beauty in the universe, following it by an effort to do things that show that beauty to others. But the next reason, so we've considered that God is an artist and we are made in his image. We've considered that the world around us is a place that is made to make art. It is a sandbox game of sorts where we can do almost limitless things with it. We've been given an imagination to come up with that. Art is good for us. It slows us down, allows us to see the world around us. Art also brings shalom to the world. I've used that word intentionally. Do you guys remember a couple of years ago they put out a paper, part of our faith and practice. I don't know if it was actually part of the faith and practice, but they put it out. They described who we as friends are. They used the acronym SPICES. Yeah, anybody know what SPICES stands for?
Simplicity.
Simplicity. Peace. Oh, come on, guys. Integrity. Community, equality, and stewardship.
Yeah.
The second one of those is peace. When we think of peace as Americans, we think of the English meaning of the word peace, which is an absence of conflict. It can mean other things, but that's the primary term. When we read the word peace in the Bible, we often think of that. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And we think, blessed are those, and this is sometimes even the way it's preached, blessed are those who see conflict in the world, who see people who aren't getting along, and bring peace to their lives by bringing those people together and showing them they have similarities and not everything is wrong, and makes them friends, right? Well, that's the Greek meaning of peace too. It's the same as ours, an absence of conflict, an absence of struggle, toil, striving. But shalom, the Hebrew meaning of peace, is a much broader, larger word. There's a reason why every time they greet each other and say shalom as hello or shalom as they're leaving, it means simply peace. It's Aramaic, it's Hebrew, and it means peace. But it's from a root word. Anybody know what the root word means? Whole. Complete. And the way they would use it is shalom aleichem. Peace be to you, wholeness in your life. The primary meaning of that is that you might have the things in your life that bring you a sense of wholeness, of completeness, of contentment. That's financial. Shalom. May you have enough money so that you are whole and complete, not worried about, afraid of, or needing anything. Shalom. May you have the food that you need. May your relationships bring you peace. May you be whole and complete in your relationships. Shalom, spiritually. May your relationship with God and the world around you bring you completeness and holiness, contentment. Now, the New Testament was written in Greek, which has a very similar meaning to our idea of peace. But Jesus was most likely speaking Aramaic or Hebrew when he was talking to the disciples and the people he was teaching. And sometimes the word that is translated peace would better be understood as shalom. So when Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, he's not saying blessed are those who see conflict in the world and separate two people who are fighting, who go to one country and they say, look, how can we work this out so that there's no war between you and your neighboring country? That's not what Jesus meant. Blessed are those who bring contentment and wholeness, completeness to the world around them. Blessed are those who, like God does, brings contentment peace to their neighbors. That sense of, I've got what I need in this moment. I should also add, shalom doesn't simply mean the circumstances of your life. That is probably the primary way it was used. But it can also mean I have, despite a lack of stuff in my life, I have a mental, emotional, spiritual state where I am content nevertheless. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That is in the context of I know what it's like to be content, whether I have need or whether I don't, whether I have plenty or I don't have enough. I've learned to be content. That is shalom. What he's saying there, he's describing shalom. I have shalom if I'm hungry and there's no food in my refrigerator. I have shalom if it's raining and I have no shelter. I have that sense of peace because God is working in me. I can do all those things. I can have shalom in all those cases, regardless. Another instance in Ephesians, it says that we would be bonded together in the unity of peace. That makes no sense in English. That doesn't make sense if you take peace as meaning absence of conflict. That you and I have unity based upon the fact that we're not fighting with each other. It's actually the other way around. We don't fight with each other because we have unity. So why would it say that? But if you change that and you switch it up and you say shalom, wholeness, completeness, contentment, we are bound together in the unity of contentment. James says, what is causing the wars and the fightings and the difficulty and the strivings and the arguments between you? A lack of contentment. You don't have what you want.
I was going to say, it's just so, the whole world is so, contentment is just not a thing. It's all about striving and competition, and not that some of that isn't good, but that's what everything is. You never hear about contentment being a goal.
You're never satisfied, right?
Yeah.
There's always more. So when Jesus said, blessed be the peacemakers, he's talking not just to them in their world, but also to us in our world. The world around us is never at that level of shalom. They don't have that sense of peace. But we should be able to bring that to people. And as artists, that's one thing that art does. We bring shalom to the world. It's no secret that beauty and art move people. Music can calm the restless or stir the apathetic. Visual art can set minds at ease and erase anxiety. A well-turned phrase or carefully worded book can do far more than instruct. It inspires and motivates. Bland food may give the body nutrients, but a delicious meal makes the diner push their chair back and sigh in contentment. The artist is a shalom maker. That was my alternative title when I was developing this. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve and then placed them in a garden. And he told them to tend that garden. And when you think, what does it mean to tend a garden? Well, you tend a garden, that means that there's a tendril, a vine growing over here, and it needs to be clipped back so that more grapes grow. So you go and you pinch that vine off. And dead leaves fall, so you move them aside. Right? You tend the garden, you take care of it and keep it looking as nice as when you got there. Well, that's a small part of what it means to tend a garden. I don't think that's all that God meant for Adam and Eve to do. I think because of all the abilities and imagination he gave them, Eve was supposed to look at this slight hill over there and say, you know what? This hill would look amazing with flowers scattered all around. So she would go around to find flowers from here and flowers from there, and she would make a pattern with blues and greens and yellows and make an entire flower bed. And Adam would say, there's no trees in this part. Let's plant some trees. Here's an acorn that fell, or a little maple twirly thing, and we're going to plant those, and we're going to make trees here. We're going to dig out this part. We're going to cut down this hedge. And they were making this garden into a place that's beautiful. I don't know what the garden looked like when God was done with it. I imagine it was already spectacular. But if you've taken the time to ever go to an arboretum or a community garden or a place like that, you will see it doesn't look anything like the woods that have been left alone. You go to a state park, okay, woods, it's beautiful. You've got trees and underbrush, and if you go at the right time of day, the light is filtering through the green leaves on the beautiful path you're walking. That's awesome. And then you go through an arboretum, and it's been tended, and trees have been planted carefully, and they've got dogwoods all around, and cherry trees that blossom in season, and rows of daffodils here, because there was a gardener taking what God had given them and making it even better, even more spectacular. Recently, my family was invited to the home of a friend. They come to our church. They're an old couple in their 90s, and he's been a farmer his whole life, and he would dig up all these rocks in the fields as he was plowing. He'd bring those rocks home, and sometimes he'd have to drag them because they were big rocks. And he started stacking them on top of each other and sort of making sculptures. It was kind of neat. And his wife would plant flowers around them, and he got into it so much that he started going to other people's farms and asking them for their rocks. And he was somewhere and he saw this gigantic rock, and I mean, some of them were 8 feet tall and like 8 feet across, and they weighed like 25 tons. You have to hire a crane and a semi-truck. And so he'd pay $200 for a rock and then probably $5,000 to get to his house. And he'd bring it home, and he'd set it down in his yard, and he would stack a couple of the rocks on top of it, and then make a water feature underneath it, and a waterfall flowing over the top of it. And he invited me over to his house, and they placed wrought iron benches along the place, and his wife has got flower beds here and there. We sat down in there, and the butterflies were flying back and forth and landing on the flowers, and the bees were buzzing past us, hurriedly on their way to get nectar. And it just felt so calming and peaceful, and the stresses of my life just eased away. I could have stayed there for so long. They were shalom makers. They were making a place of peace for me to go to. It was wonderful. Art redeems. Art is redemption, and as God is a redeemer, so his children should be redeemers too. Art takes the broken and fixes it, the disorganized, and organizes it, the raw, and refines it. Art turns pain into beauty, and plain into extraordinary, chaos into order. So we as Christians, we think of the word redemption, and we instantaneously, and ought to, think of Christ's work on the cross that took our sins, erased them, made our slate clean before God. So the judge looks at us and sees Christ's righteousness, and looks at Christ and sees our sins as paid for. Redemption, amazing. But that's not the only meaning of redemption, the only way that God is redeeming. He is redeeming the entire world. The world is looking forward to and yearns for and longs for and cries out for the day when the curse will finally be lifted. That also is redemption. And we, as God's children, have the tremendous honor and privilege of redeeming part of the world now, of fighting the curse that we see around us, of making this world a more beautiful, wonderful place. When I first moved into my office, it was a disaster. It was packed with several old banged up filing cabinets. There were garage sale bookcases that were mostly empty. There was this huge leather desk, that's a leather top desk that sat in the middle, and the previous pastor had wanted to feed cords up, so he'd taken a pickaxe and right down to the top of the desk and through the leather, and it was old, so the leather, you could put your fingernail in it, it would leave a permanent mark in that leather. It was old and sun-bleached and disgusting, and there was a ratty old couch in there. You had to walk through aisles to get around, and I would walk in that office and just feel the tension, like it was a place of chaos and disorder, and there was no peace in that office. And the walls were full of hundreds of holes where different posters had been stuck in with thumbtacks, and nails had been hammered in, and screws had been driven in, and the paint job, which somebody had carefully done many years before, had faded and was stained in different places, and the carpet was worn out. And over the last 10 years, I have gone in and I've hung pictures on the walls and tapestries, and I've repainted them into soothing colors, and the carpet was just recently replaced with hardwoods, and I've moved out all that ugly, ratty furniture, and I've replaced it with new, beautiful furniture. And now people walk into my office and they want to stay. They walk into my office and they instantaneously feel a sense of peace, because I've redeemed what was fallen. I've corrected what was wrong, I've taken what was broken and mended it. And not to give myself any credit or glory, these are things you can all do by the Lowe's. But to be able to do that and make my office a place that was chaotic and took away peace is a good illustration of the way we can take every place in our world and do that same thing. You can do that in your homes, with your children, with your spouses, with your parents, your grandparents, with whoever you're around. You can do that in your churches. You can do that at your workplace. You can do that in the community. You can do that at Walmart. Walk by somebody, you see that they're having a bad day, say something nice. Smile, look at them, compliment them on their shoes, on their shirt, on something. Introduce them to God. Bring peace about in their lives, and the artist is capable of doing that. Art points at God. My 4 hours is almost up, so I've got to start moving quickly. Many of you, because you live here, have probably been to the Cleveland Art Museum. It's a lovely place to visit. I wouldn't want to live there. But I was in the Cleveland Art Museum several years back, and I came across an entire, I'll call it an alcove because room is too generous, of Fabergé's work. And Fabergé is well known for his gilded eggs. He was a jeweler, but apparently he did a lot more than that. He was also a painter and made cigar boxes and other things. And so this little alcove had dozens of his different works. And I sat there amazed as I looked at these tiny little paintings, no bigger than a playing card, but they were landscapes, so intricate. I had no idea. Maybe he was only using a horsehair brush with one horsehair on it, dipping it in, and just making the tiniest invisible stroke in order to come up with this painting that had clouds and trees and horses and fences and all this stuff. And I was amazed, and when I looked at the jewelry, and he had taken metal and he had bent it into perfect shapes and gilded it, and it was amazing. But I didn't find myself simply going, wow, this is beautiful art. I found myself thinking, I really wish I could watch him work. I wish I could see Fabergé make this. I want to just be a fly on the wall while he's doing one of these paintings and see how close he's getting. Is he using a magnifying glass? What type of brush is he using? What type of paint is he using? When he's making one of his eggs or one of his other pieces of jewelry, how is he forming this? I want to know, how does his mind work? Because there were things that he had made that I never would have imagined myself. I couldn't have come up with them in my mind. So what kind of person was he? I'd love to have dinner with him, to talk with him, to get to know him. His art pointed back to him and made me want to get to know him. Our art can do that. Maybe you've seen some of these pictures and you're like, I would like to know Doug. I'd like to be out there when he's photographing some of these things and see, how did he get this photo? Did you maybe know that this water is only an inch from my camera? That wave, and so I'm out in the waves, and I'm about waist deep, and I bring my camera down, I'm crouched down, the wave comes up, and I jump really high just before it gets there. Down to the next one, I'm snapping pictures, trying to get the right angle of the sun and the glint of and maybe it makes you want to know me. I'm sorry if it does. Because that's not my purpose. Because we as Christians and artists are meant to do more than draw people to us. Our art is meant to point people towards God. That is my hope when I hang these, when I display them, when I put them on Facebook, is never anymore that people would look at them and say, that Doug guy, he's a good artist. I'd like to know him. If that's the case, I wasted my time. But if they look at that and they say, the God who made those butterflies, the God who made those sunsets and those waterfalls and those landscapes, that's a God I want to know. If my art draws people into worship of God, then I've done what I've accomplished and set out to do. Almost everything I do these days is meant to draw people into a closer relationship with God. My art, my pastorness, my child of Godness have all sort of melded together to make me who I am today. And art does point very well to God. There's a quote, I haven't read any other quotes that are found in here. You can take time to read through this later or just toss the trash if you like. The earth is art, the photographer is only a witness. Bertrand said that. You know, a very famous photographer. The earth is art, the photographer is only a witness. One of the reasons why I think photography is still my favorite of the arts is because I can look at something, I can capture something, and then other people look at it and they don't see me. They see the world as I've seen it, and they see the God that's behind the world as I've seen it. I also said that I've recently gotten to collecting rocks and polishing rocks, and I really, really enjoy that. If you went to my office right now, you'd find multiple bookshelves that have had the books removed, and rocks are placed on those shelves. And I've actually got a table out in our foyer of our church where there's more rocks being displayed. Last night we went to a friend's house, and they have 3 young children. I don't connect as well with children as I used to, but I have a bag of rocks with me that I polished and I hand out to kids. And so I was able to hand them out to kids, and every child loves rocks, and they instantly were drawn to me, and now they're willing to talk, and they're out in the driveway for the rest of the night looking for rocks in their gravel driveway and showing me, what's this rock and what's that rock, and this one's smooth and this one's white and this one has some green on it. Well, scratch it off, that's moss. But they were drawn into this. And the neatest thing about polishing rocks is I've never had anybody come up to me and say, you are so good at polishing rocks. Like, you really know how to tumble. No, they look at these rocks, the blues and the purples and the pinks and the greens and the yellows and their crystals and their patterns. And some are, they're just amazing. There's so much variety of rocks. Even the greatest geologists on Earth can't even tell you the names of half the different rocks that have been found and discovered. And they point directly to God. People look at them and they say, wow, God made all of that? Amazing. And so, through my art, I'm able to point to God. Art is a form of worship. Now, if you look ahead, don't say anything. If you haven't looked down at the paper, does anybody know who the first person in the Bible that's recorded to have been filled with the Spirit is? You don't have to have his name or her name.
The one that was commissioned to do the art in the tabernacle.
Exactly. His name is Bezalel.
Yes.
And yeah, not a name you need to remember unless you're really into Bible trivia. He was the first person in Scripture, not Adam, Abraham, Enoch. No, we're talking about Mount Sinai. God tells Moses, there's this guy and my Spirit is upon him, and I've given him skills and talents, and I work through him to make arts of all different kinds, and I want him to build me a tabernacle and to oversee the entire building of all the different things. Art is something that we do with the Spirit of God working on us. It can be something that the Spirit uses us for. We get that with music, right? And there are a lot of words in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, that mean worship or praise that have to do with music. And music is an art. The audible arts like poetry, song, and music are often a type of prayer. Other types of audio arts are either sung to God or sung about God. Art is a form of worship. I've actually got farther than I expected, but that's great. I'm skipping forward now because my 4.5 hours is almost up. And if I leave any time for questions and a short break, then I need to be done. Art will improve your perspective. If you become an artist and set about to actually do art on a regular basis, you will begin to see the world around you differently. You will taste food differently. You will see color differently. You'll look at a sunset differently. You'll hear music differently. An artist views the world around them differently and in a way that draws them closer to God. Go ahead and read that section later. How should you respond? The answer to this question responds greatly on an individual starting point. There is, however, one broad response that applies to everyone. If you've been listening and you haven't just nodded off, and I haven't seen anybody actually fall completely asleep, you should begin by asking God, what do you want me to do in response to what I've heard here today? How do you want me personally to respond? And then listen. We do far too much talking to God and far too little listening.
Amen.
Let him speak. Let him impress upon your heart how he wants you to respond to his call on your life to be an artist. If you're already making art, if it's part of your daily job, it's part of who you are, if you are a musician, if you do paint, if you do sketch in a book somewhere, if you are a writer, great. Make sure you're using those abilities and gifts to point to God, to give him glory, to better serve him, to bring peace to the world and shalom. If you are an artist who designs as part of your work, make sure you're doing it with excellence. Make the world a more beautiful place. The baker, if baking is your art, you should be baking for other people. Make food that's as good as possible. Make a plate of cookies, bring it to church. Hand it out to your neighbors. Hand it out to strangers. If there's a line worker working on the power lines outside your house, and you're baking some cookies, take them a couple of plates. They're going to say yes. If a car breaks down in front of your house, take them something. A loaf of bread, maybe freshly baked bread. If you're not a baker, you're not going to be doing those things. But if you've got that on hand, share that with the world. Bring shalom to their lives. If you are a non-artist, probably not the case for most people in this room, but if you don't think of yourself as an artist, prayerfully consider why. Because you were made in the image of the artist. You were made to be a maker, created to be a creator, designed to be a designer. It's not or should not be optional. I skipped the part where I said I was going to talk about being consumers. It's in there. You guys can read it later.